My name is Mabel Whitley, and I'm 81 years old. I've lived my life in the sleepy town of Springfield, nestled between the green hills of Missouri. Not much happens here, and for most of my life I was content with that. I raised 5 children, married a man who was kind in his own way, and spent my days in the church, faithful, dutiful, and obedient. But if you ask anyone about me, they'll tell you the same thing. Mabel Whitley, a good woman, a loving mother. What they don't know is the story behind that label. What they don't know is the secret I've carried for decades. My story isn't one I like to tell. It's a heavy burden, but as I sit here alone in my small apartment at Maplewood Senior Living, I realize it's a story I can no longer keep hidden. You see, I was born to a mother who believed in control. She believed that women had a role to play, no exceptions. Her idea of motherhood was strict, unyielding, and driven by tradition. But it wasn't just about raising children. For my mother, it was about control in every aspect of life. And the church, with all its deacons and righteous men, was the perfect place for her to exercise that control. I was just 18 when she told me I was going to marry a man from the church. His name was Deacon Joshua Rivers. Tall, well-spoken, and respected in the community. My mother spoke highly of him, of course. He was the kind of man that people looked up to, and she thought he would be a perfect match for me. But I didn't love him. I didn't even know him. But that didn't matter. You'll do your duty, my mother would say. Marriage is about commitment, about serving the Lord, about raising children in His name. And that's exactly what I did. Joshua and I married, and soon after I was pregnant with our first child. But it didn't take long for me to realize something was wrong. It wasn't Joshua's temper or the way he ignored me when we were alone. It was that he wasn't the only man my mother had chosen for me. I never thought much about it until I found out that Joshua wasn't the only deacon in our church my mother had arranged to father my children. She had a plan for me, one that was calculated and clear. 5 children, 4 different deacons. Joshua had only been the first. Then came Deacon Samuel Hartman, then Deacon Frank Lawson, and finally, Deacon Thomas Blackwell. Each one fathered one of my children, but none of them were truly mine. Gave birth, yes. I raised them, yes. But my mother, in her infinite wisdom, had found a way to help me fulfill my duties, whether I wanted to or not. I thought I was trapped. I thought that the church, my mother's expectations, and the weight of it all would crush me. But I played my part. I smiled, raised my children, and went to church every Sunday. No one knew. No one could ever know what my mother had done to me. And yet, here I am, 81 years old, sitting in my quiet apartment, with a lifetime of regrets and secrets festering in the corners of my mind. The truth is, I've lived my life like a shadow of who I was meant to be. I've sacrificed my happiness, my identity, and my voice, all because of the plan my mother had for me. But now, after all these years, the time has come for my truth to be heard. The clock ticks louder in the silence of my apartment. My children don't visit as often as they used to. I'm left with nothing but my memories and the knowledge that they will never understand the pain I carried. But they'll learn. They'll learn the truth, even if it's the last thing I do. And as I sit here, with the weight of my past pressing down on me, I hear a knock at the door. I get up slowly, my joints aching, and open it to find my daughter Christine. She looks at me with those same eyes that saw me as a mother who could do no wrong. But there's something different in her expression today. Something that tells me she's come to ask questions. "Mom, we need to talk," she says, her voice laced with both concern and determination. I found something. Something that changes everything. The door closes behind her, and I feel my heart race. What could she have found? What is it she thinks she knows? And in that moment I realize. The time has come. My secret is no longer mine to keep. I motion for Christine to sit, my hands trembling slightly as I poured tea into 2 cups. The warmth of the liquid didn't ease the cold knot in my stomach. Something in her eyes, the way she had walked in, so composed yet full of silent tension, told me this conversation wasn't going to be like the others. It wasn't going to be one of those casual chats about the weather or her kids, where we could pretend that everything was fine. I sat down across from her, forcing myself to meet her gaze. The years had worn lines around her eyes, the same way they had etched my own. I could see so much of myself in her, the same quiet determination, the same unspoken questions. She set the folder on the table between us. The thick stack of papers sat there, heavy with unspoken truth. "Mom, her voice faltered, but she pressed on. "I've been going through some old family records. Found a list of names, dates. You never mentioned any of this, and it doesn't add up." I swallowed hard, the knot in my stomach tightening. This was it. The moment I had always feared. My daughter was too smart, too resourceful, not to uncover the truth eventually. She had already pieced together something. She had seen the signs, the gaps in the story, the missing parts of her own history. "Christine, you don't understand," I whispered, the words slipping out before I could stop them. "There's so much more than you realize." She leaned forward, eyes fixed on mine. "What is it, Mom? What happened?" I looked down at my hands, the wrinkles in my skin suddenly too obvious, too exposed. For so many years I had kept quiet, hidden behind the walls of the house, behind my role as the perfect mother, the dutiful wife. But now those walls were crumbling, and the truth was crawling out from the cracks. "Christine," I began, my voice breaking, "when I was young my mother had plans for me. Plans that were never my own. She made sure that I married Deacon Joshua, and then she made sure I had children with the other deacons. But it wasn't love. It wasn't even about family. It was about control. About her control over my life, my choices. She wanted me to have children with these men to keep the church strong, to solidify her place in the community." Christine's breath caught in her throat, and I could see the shock registering in her eyes. "Mom, you're saying you had children with 4 different men?" Her voice was soft, but the words hung in the air, sharp and heavy. I nodded slowly. The shame washed over me like a tide, but I forced myself to continue. "Yes. My mother. She manipulated me, told me it was my duty as a woman, as a wife. I didn't know how to say no. I didn't know how to break free." I paused, feeling the weight of the years of silence pressing down on me. I had 5 children, yes, but none of them were born out of love. None of them came from my heart. They were the product of my mother's plan. Christine's eyes were wide, filled with disbelief and hurt. "How could she do that to you? How could you let her do that?" I sighed, tears welling up in my eyes. "I didn't let her, Christine. I thought I had no choice. When you're raised to believe that everything you do is for the family, for the church, for the Lord, you don't question it. You just do what you're told. And I did. But each time it broke me a little more. Each time I felt like less of myself." She sat back, the shock still written on her face. "But Mom, why didn't you tell us? Why didn't you tell me? We were your children. We were supposed to be your priority." I closed my eyes, the memory of my younger self flooding back. The girl who had been so eager to please, so desperate to be the perfect daughter, the perfect wife. "I didn't tell you because I thought it was too late," I whispered. "I thought it was my burden to carry, that I had to live with the choices I made. I didn't want you to carry that shame too. But now I realize that it's not just mine to bear. It's yours too. And I'm sorry. I should have told you sooner." There was a long silence between us. Christine was still processing everything. She didn't speak for a few moments, just stared at me with a mixture of confusion and sadness. Finally she looked at me, her voice steady but full of pain. "So, all of this, all the sacrifices, all the things we never understood growing up, it was all because of Grandma. She controlled your whole life, didn't she? She used you." I nodded, my heart aching as the weight of the truth settled between us. "Yes. And it wasn't just me she used. She used the church, the deacons. She used everything she could to get what she wanted. And I went along with it because I thought I had no other choice. But I did. I always did." Christine's eyes softened, and she reached across the table, taking my hand in hers. "Mom, I don't know if I can ever fully understand how you lived through that. But I get it now. I understand why you've always been so quiet, so distant at times. You were protecting us, weren't you? I squeezed her hand, grateful for her understanding, even as it shattered me to admit the truth. I tried to protect you, Christine. But I can't protect you from the truth anymore. She sat back, her gaze far away. What are we going to do now, Mom? What happens now? I swallowed hard. We take control of our own lives. We live on our terms. And we break the cycle. We break it here and now. Christine nodded slowly, as if the weight of the decision was slowly sinking in. But the family, your children, the church, what happens when they find out? A chill ran down my spine at the thought of the church finding out, of my children discovering everything I had kept from them for so long. But I knew deep down it didn't matter anymore. My secret had been kept long enough. Let them find out, I said, my voice stronger than it had ever been. It's time they knew the truth. All of it. I thought telling Christine the truth would be the hardest part. But the moment I uttered those words, I realized the truth had only just begun to unravel. The weight of my past had been a burden I carried alone for so many years, but now it was out in the open, and nothing was ever going to be the same. After our conversation, I didn't hear from Christine for a couple of days. She needed time to process, I knew that. But what I didn't expect was the storm that was coming, one I wasn't sure I could survive. It was a Thursday morning when the first ripple hit. The phone rang, its shrill sound cutting through the quiet of my apartment. I knew it wasn't a call I wanted to take, but I also knew I couldn't avoid it. It was from the church. "Hello, Mabel," the voice on the other end said, sharp and formal. "This is Deacon Harris. We need to speak with you. There are some concerns regarding your family. It's about the children you raised. And the men you associated with." My heart stopped. I had expected the church to react eventually, but I never thought it would happen this quickly. The deacon's words were laced with judgment, as if he already knew everything I had kept buried for decades. I hadn't even thought about what would happen if my past ever reached the church. Now here it was knocking at my door. I don't know what you mean," I stammered, though I could feel the cold sweat building on the back of my neck. "What concerns?" "The truth, Mabel. We've heard the rumors. We've spoken with some of the other deacons. Your family's reputation is at stake. You need to come to the church immediately to address these concerns." I felt as if the ground was collapsing beneath me. The church, the one place that had given me comfort, that had been the foundation of my life, was now the place I feared most. They were demanding answers. Answers I didn't know how to give. "I'll come," I said, my voice barely a whisper. "I'll be there." When I arrived at the church, I felt like an outsider in my own life. The walls, which once felt like sanctuary, now seemed to close in on me. The wooden pews, the stained glass windows, the smell of incense, it all felt foreign, like I was walking into the past I had tried so hard to leave behind. Deacon Harris was waiting for me in his office, the same office I had sat in countless times over the years, attending church meetings, seeking advice, praying for strength. But now the room felt cold, sterile. "Mabel," he said, his voice laced with disdain, "we have a problem. Serious one. Your children, they're asking questions. They're digging into your past. And people are starting to talk." I didn't speak at first. I didn't know what to say. The truth, now that it was out, felt like a tidal wave crashing against me, and I was powerless to stop it. "Do you understand the gravity of this situation?" he continued. "The church's reputation is at stake. If this gets out, if the community finds out what you did, it will reflect on all of us." I wanted to scream, to tell him that it wasn't my fault, that I was just a young girl, manipulated and controlled by my mother. I wanted to explain that I had been trapped in a life I didn't choose, that I had done what I thought was right. But all I could do was nod, helpless. "I never wanted any of this," I whispered. "I never wanted any of it." Deacon Harris sighed, as though my pain was nothing more than an inconvenience. "The church is here to help you, Mabel. But you need to make a decision. Will you cooperate, or will this destroy everything?" I didn't answer immediately. My mind was spinning and my heart was racing. What choice did I have? The church had always been my support system, my lifeline. But now, it felt like the very thing that had once given me strength was now threatening to tear me apart. I will do whatever it takes, I finally said, my voice shaking. But I need help. I can't do this alone. He leaned back in his chair, his eyes narrowing. We'll help you, Mabel. But you must keep the peace. Your family, your reputation, everything depends on it. That evening, as I sat alone in my apartment, I couldn't stop shaking. The conversation with Deacon Harris had left me rattled, unsure of how to move forward. But I knew one thing. I couldn't let the church control my life any longer. When Christine called later that night, her voice was softer than it had been before. Mom, she said, I've been thinking a lot about what you told me. About Grandma, about the Deacons. I know it's been hard for you, but I don't think I can keep quiet anymore. The truth needs to be out there. I closed my eyes, feeling the weight of her words settle into my chest. Christine, it's not that simple, I said, my voice breaking. The church, they won't let this go. They'll do whatever they can to cover it up. They'll turn everyone against us. Christine's silence on the other end of the line was deafening. When she finally spoke, her words were steady, full of resolve. We can't let them control us anymore, Mom. We have to fight. For ourselves. For the truth. Her words were a call to action, one I wasn't sure I was ready to answer. But deep down I knew she was right. The time had come to stop hiding. The time had come to face the consequences of the truth, no matter how painful it might be. I didn't sleep much that night. I spent the hours pacing back and forth in my small apartment, my mind running wild with thoughts of what was coming. The church, my family, Christine, everything was changing and I wasn't sure I was strong enough to handle it. But deep down, something inside me was starting to wake up. For so many years, I had let others control my life, my choices, my destiny. Now, for the first time, I had the chance to take control. Christine was right. We couldn't keep hiding forever. We couldn't let the church dictate who we were any longer. But the consequences of exposing the truth, of speaking out, were terrifying. I had already lost so much. What would I lose next? The next morning I called Christine. Her voice was sharp with urgency when she answered. Mom, I've been thinking. It's time. We have to go public. We have to speak out. The longer we wait, the more the church will try to bury this. I hesitated, staring out the window at the street below. Christine, you don't understand. This could ruin everything. The church. Mom, they're already trying to ruin us. If we don't take control, we'll be silenced forever. Her words stung, but they were true. I had spent my whole life trying to protect my family from the truth, trying to keep up appearances, trying to preserve a reputation that wasn't even real. But in doing so, I had trapped us all. I'll do it, I said, my voice steady despite the fear swelling inside me. I'll go public. But we have to do this carefully. We need a plan. By the end of the week, we had a plan in place. Christine had already reached out to some of the reporters in town, people she knew would listen and not just run with the church's narrative. We decided to do an interview, a public one. It would be a chance for us to tell our side of the story, to explain what had really happened, to expose the truth. But as the days passed, the pressure grew. I couldn't shake the feeling that I was making a terrible mistake. Was I doing this for justice, or was I doing it to ease my own guilt? The more I thought about it, the more confused I became. Then, one evening just before our interview was scheduled to air, I received an unexpected phone call. It was from my son, Luke. Mom, he said, his voice full of concern. I've been hearing things. People are talking. The church. They're threatening to cut off ties with us. They're saying you're causing scandal. What's going on? I closed my eyes, knowing this was only the beginning. Luke, I said softly, the truth is coming out. I can't hide it anymore. Mom, you can't do this. It's going to destroy everything. Do you really think exposing this is the right thing? Do you think it's worth it? His words hit me like a punch to the gut. I wanted to scream, to tell him how hard it had been, how much I had suffered, how much we had all suffered. But instead I found myself whispering, "I have to do this, Luke. I can't live this lie anymore." The silence on the other end of the line was deafening. And then finally he spoke. "I don't know if I can support you in this. You're breaking our family apart." The words felt like a slap. I had never wanted to hurt my children. But as much as it pained me to hear it, I knew that this was the price of truth. It wasn't going to be easy. It was never going to be easy. "I'm sorry," I whispered, my voice cracking. "But I have to do this." The night of the interview, I sat in front of the camera, feeling more exposed than I had ever felt in my life. The studio lights felt too bright, too hot. I could feel the sweat gathering on my forehead as I looked at the reporter, a woman named Sarah Jenkins who had been nothing but kind during our initial conversations. "Are you ready, Mabel?" Sarah asked gently, her voice soft but steady. I nodded, swallowing hard. "Yes." As the interview began, I felt the weight of the years I had spent hiding my truth pressing down on me. The words tumbled out, about my mother's manipulation, the control, the forced marriages, the 5 children with the 4 deacons. I said it all. I said the things I had never even allowed myself to say out loud. The interview was raw, emotional, and painful. But as the final question was asked, something inside me shifted. I wasn't just talking for myself anymore. I was talking for every woman who had ever been silenced, every person who had been forced to live a lie. I finished with one final sentence, a declaration to the world. I did what I had to do to survive. But I'm not surviving anymore. I'm living. And I'm taking back my voice. The aftermath of the interview was immediate, and it was devastating. Within hours, the church's response was swift and unforgiving. Deacon Harris called me the very next day, his voice full of righteous fury. "Mabel, you've gone too far. You've humiliated this church, this community. You've brought shame to your family, and now we have to deal with the consequences. You've caused a scandal that we can't recover from." His words stung, but they didn't break me. What could they say that I hadn't already said myself? The truth was out there, and nothing could change that. I had lost my family's support, yes, but I had gained something far more important, my freedom. But the consequences didn't end with the church. I had to face my children, Luke especially. He didn't understand. He didn't see the pain I had carried for so many years. And that hurt more than anything else. Christine, on the other hand, was standing by me, even though the fallout was just as painful for her. "Mom, this isn't going to be easy," she said one night as we sat together in my apartment. "But you did the right thing. The truth was never going to stay buried." I nodded, wiping away the tears that had come unbidden. "I hope so. I hope it was worth it." But even as the world seemed to crumble around me, I knew that I had done the right thing. The weight had been lifted, and I was no longer living in fear. I had faced the truth, and in doing so, I had taken back control of my life. The days after the interview were a blur of angry phone calls, gossip, and whispered conversations behind closed doors. I had never felt so exposed, so vulnerable. The church, my family, the community, they all had their opinions, and none of them were in my favor. I could feel the weight of their judgment pressing down on me, but strangely, it didn't crush me. It used to. It used to destroy me when people would talk behind my back, when I would see the pity in their eyes. But now the shame was gone. It was Christine who was the strongest in those days. While the world seemed to turn against me, she stood by my side, a fierce protector in the face of the storm. She wasn't afraid to speak out, to fight for me. And I knew deep down that she had inherited something from me, something I had long forgotten, the strength to stand up even when everyone else wanted to keep you down. "Mom," she said one evening after another angry phone call from Luke, "we can't keep running from this. We have to face it head on. No more hiding, no more pretending it's not happening." I nodded, looking out the window of my apartment at the street below. It was so quiet, almost too quiet. The calm before the storm, I thought. "I'm tired, Christine," I whispered, the weight of it all sinking in. "I'm tired of fighting, tired of losing everyone I love." She sat next to me, taking my hand. "You're not losing everyone, Mom. But you've got to understand, you're not the only one who's been carrying this burden. We've all been living in the shadow of your silence, and now that the truth is out, it's hard for people to face it. But we're in this together." Her words brought me a small comfort, but the truth was, the pain didn't stop just because I had exposed it. It was like opening a wound that had festered for so long. It bled everywhere, touching everyone in my life. My children, my friends, the people who once respected me. They were all affected by the truth, and it felt like I was being punished for something I didn't even have control over. But I wasn't the only one suffering. My son Luke was struggling the most. I had expected him to be angry, but his anger was different. It was laced with betrayal, with confusion. He couldn't understand why I hadn't protected him from the truth, from the reality of the life I had lived. He couldn't understand why I had kept it from him. "I never wanted you to know, Luke," I said softly one evening when he came to visit, his face hard with frustration. "I never wanted you to carry this burden with me. You think you protected me, Mom?" His voice cracked. "You think that hiding the truth from me was protection? You think I don't see what's happening? You've ruined our family." I felt the sting of his words, each one cutting deeper than the last. But I knew deep down that I had to let him say it. I had to let him scream to release the anger he felt. I had to let him see me, really see me, in all my brokenness. Because that was the only way we could heal. "I'm sorry, Luke," I whispered, tears stinging my eyes. "I never wanted to hurt you. I never wanted to hurt any of you." He didn't respond. He just stood there, looking at me as if he didn't know who I was anymore. And for the first time I realized that maybe I didn't know who I was either. The weeks dragged on. The phone calls didn't stop. The whispers didn't fade. But amidst the chaos, something unexpected began to happen. I started to rebuild. Slowly, painfully, but surely. It wasn't easy, and it wasn't without setbacks. But the act of telling the truth, of taking control of my own life, was like planting seeds in barren soil. It took time to grow, but it would eventually bear fruit. Christine and I continued to meet with the women's support group we had started. It became a place of solace for me, a place where I could connect with others who had lived through similar struggles. The women in that group were the ones who understood, the ones who didn't judge me, who didn't look at me with pity. They saw me for who I was, a survivor. And through them I began to heal. One day, as I sat in a meeting with the group, a woman named Sarah shared her story. She was younger than me, but her pain resonated with me in a way I hadn't expected. She had been in an abusive relationship, one that had left her broken. But as she spoke, there was a strength in her voice. There was a power in the way she told her story, and for the first time, I felt like maybe I wasn't the only one who could rise from the ashes. "I never thought I would be able to speak about it," Sarah said, wiping away tears. "But when I did, I felt like I could breathe again. And in that moment I realized something profound. It wasn't about the shame anymore. It wasn't about what the church or my family thought of me. It was about my own healing, my own growth. And as I looked around the room at the faces of the women who had shared their truths, I realized that I wasn't alone. One afternoon, as I was walking through the park, I bumped into an old friend from church, Evelyn. She had always been kind to me, even when I felt like I didn't belong. "Mabel," she said, her voice soft but genuine, "I've heard the rumors, but I wanted to come and tell you that I believe you. I've always believed in you. You're stronger than you think." Her words struck me deeply, and for the first time in a long time I didn't feel completely alone. She hadn't judged me. She hadn't turned her back on me. "I'm trying to rebuild, Evelyn," I said, my voice shaky. "But it's hard. My family, my children, they're so angry." "I know," she said gently, taking my hand. "But you're doing the right thing. The truth is always the right thing, no matter the cost. Keep going, Mabel. You're going to get through this." It wasn't a magical fix, but it was a step in the right direction. It was the kind of support I had been craving for so long. As the days passed, I began to rebuild my relationship with Christine. We spent more time together, not just talking about the past, but planning for the future. She had been my rock through all of this, and for the first time I truly felt like we were healing together. The future was still uncertain. The church's grip on our family hadn't loosened, and the scars of the past were still there, lurking beneath the surface. But I knew one thing: the truth had set me free. It had freed me from the shackles of my mother's control, from the shame of my past, and from the fear of being exposed. I was no longer the woman who lived in silence. I was no longer the woman who hid her truth to protect others. I was the woman who had fought for her voice, for her life, and for her family's future. And for the first time in years I could finally breathe. It wasn't easy, this rebuilding. It wasn't as simple as apologizing and expecting everything to go back to normal. The truth had a price, and I had to pay it every day. Every phone call, every glance from my children that spoke of hurt and betrayal, every conversation that felt like a confrontation, I paid the price for speaking the truth. But somehow, through it all, I had a sense of peace that I had never known before. The shame, the guilt, they were no longer my companions. The weight of the secret that had burdened me for so long had lifted, and with it came a clarity I hadn't realized I was missing. Christine stood by me, unwavering, even as the rest of the family kept their distance. Luke still hadn't come around. His silence was deafening, and I could feel the chasm between us widening with every passing day. He didn't understand. He didn't want to understand, and maybe he never would. But Christine, my daughter, my greatest ally, kept reminding me that the journey was far from over. One evening, as we sat together at the kitchen table, Christine spoke softly, her eyes focused on her hands as she fiddled with the edge of her napkin. "Mom, I've been thinking a lot about the church," she said, her voice cautious. "I think it's time we confront them. We can't let them keep doing this to us." I looked up, startled. "Christine, what are you saying? We've already exposed the truth. What more do we need to do?" She met my gaze, her eyes firm and filled with determination. "The church needs to know they can't control us anymore. They need to understand that the secrets they've buried for so long, our family, our pain, aren't theirs to manipulate. I think it's time we stand up to them. Not just as individuals, but as a family." I felt a surge of pride in my chest. Christine had inherited my strength, my will to fight for what's right. But I was also terrified. Standing up to the church wasn't just about me and my children. It was about the entire community. The repercussions would be felt beyond our family, and I wasn't sure if we could handle it. "Christine, I don't know if I'm strong enough for that," I said quietly. "What if they turn everyone against us? What if this is the end of everything?" She reached across the table, her hand resting gently over mine. "Mom, sometimes you have to lose everything to find yourself. We've lost enough. It's time to take back our power." The decision was made. Christine and I planned to confront the church, to demand accountability, to challenge the narrative that had been built around our family. We didn't know how it would go, but we knew it had to be done. The night before the meeting with the church elders, I sat alone in my apartment, staring at the quiet darkness outside. I had spent so many years hiding, pretending, that now, in this moment of clarity, I felt almost exposed. But it was also freeing. This was the first time in my life I was fighting not just for my children but for myself. I knew the church would fight back. I knew they wouldn't let this go quietly. But that didn't matter anymore. The truth had been spoken, and there was no going back. The next morning, Christine and I walked into the church, our heads held high. I hadn't stepped foot in this place since the interview had aired, and the coldness of the familiar walls sent a chill through me. The deacons, the ones who had once welcomed me with open arms, now regarded me with a mixture of disdain and pity. Deacon Harris, the same man who had called me the day after the interview, was sitting at the head of the table. His eyes narrowed as he watched us. "Mabel, Christine," he said, his voice dripping with thinly veiled judgment. "I don't know what you're trying to accomplish here, but you've brought shame upon this church. You've exposed the very foundation of our community." I swallowed hard but stood firm. "You don't get to control us anymore, Deacon Harris. You don't get to dictate our lives, our choices. We're here to take back what's ours. The room fell silent. The deacons exchanged glances, their faces set in hard, unreadable expressions. But I didn't care. I was done hiding. Your power ends today, I continued, my voice stronger than I had ever thought it could be. We will no longer live in the shadows of your control. We will no longer let you decide our worth. The truth is out, and we will stand by it. After that day, nothing was the same. The fallout from our confrontation with the church was swift and brutal. The church leaders rallied against us, spreading rumors and lies, trying to undermine everything we had fought for. But this time it wasn't just me against them. Christine was by my side, and together we weren't backing down. We started speaking out, telling our story wherever we could. The more we shared, the more people came forward. Women who had been silenced by the same church, by the same deacons, by the same system of control. Each story was a testament to our strength, and each voice added to the chorus of truth. But not everyone stood by us. Some of my children refused to support me. Luke remained distant, his anger still raw and deep. I couldn't blame him for that. The truth was painful, and I had given him something he wasn't ready to handle. But that was his journey, not mine. The town became divided. Some supported us, others condemned us. But the more the church tried to silence us, the more our voices grew. We weren't just fighting for our family anymore. We were fighting for everyone who had ever been oppressed, for everyone who had ever been told their truth didn't matter. In the end, it wasn't about revenge. It wasn't about hurting anyone. It was about reclaiming our dignity. It was about breaking free from the chains of shame that had bound us for so long. And even as the world around me continued to shift, as the anger and resentment swirled in every corner, I knew one thing. I was free. I had finally taken control of my life. And no matter what happened next, no one could take that away from me. As the months passed, the dust began to settle. The chaos, the confrontation, the accusations, everything seemed to quiet down, but not without leaving its mark. The church had tried to destroy us, to bury the truth, but instead it had only empowered us. The weight of the past, the fear of being exposed, it had all been worth it for this moment of freedom. Christine and I had made it through the storm together. Our bond was stronger than ever, forged in the fires of truth and pain. We had faced the darkest parts of our lives and emerged on the other side, not unscathed, but undeniably stronger. The town had changed too. While some people continued to whisper and point fingers, others came forward to support us. The church's grip on the community was slipping, and in its place, people were finding their voices. They were realizing that they didn't have to hide their truths anymore. They didn't have to live in fear of being silenced. Christine and I began to speak at events, sharing our story of courage and resilience, inspiring others to do the same. It wasn't just about the church anymore. It was about empowerment. It was about making sure that no one had to live in the shadows of shame and fear, that no one had to bury their truth to protect someone else. One evening, after another successful talk, Christine turned to me as we sat in the car on our way home. "Mom," she said, her voice filled with emotion, "look at what we've done. Look at how far we've come. This is our victory." I smiled, my heart full. We had done it. We had faced the storm, and we had come out stronger. It wasn't perfect. We still had our struggles, our losses, and our scars. But we had each other. And that was enough. As I looked out the window, the sun setting on the horizon, I realized something. The road ahead was still long, but we had already crossed the hardest part. We had told the truth. We had taken back our lives. And in that moment I knew that nothing, no church, no judgment, no shame, could ever take away our freedom again. Thank you for joining me on this journey. If my story has inspired you, if you found strength in our struggle, I invite you to be a part of this community. Subscribe to my channel for more stories, more courage, and more inspiration.